Welcome to the Possibility Action Network podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton, aka Possibility Man. We're committed to bringing you guests who strive to better people's lives and serve as a force for good in the world. Our guest today is Harvey Weatherford. She has had a varied career. As she says, she was a drug and alcohol addicted cover girl in her 20s. She partied with the Hollywood crowd, including spending time at Playboy, a global lifestyle company. Jo turned her life around, earned a master's degree, and now is working on a doctorate. Professor Weatherford teaches at a university and is also a prominent TEDx speaker. Harvey Weatherford, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Look, I'm excited. The moment I saw your TEDx speech, I thought, I hope that she says yes when I extend this invitation to her. But look, this is the Possibility Action Network. We are all about possibility. I'm going to ask you a question. What have you learned about what's possible up until this time in life?
Oh, such a great question. I mean, honestly, if I can just freeze frame a moment for you, I am in jail. I have zero possibilities of getting sober. I don't believe it is possible for me. I have completely ruined my life. I am in the throes of addiction and depression. I don't want to live anymore. So that is one snippet of life compared to today, where I live in Cabo on the beach. I have amazing friends. I've been sober from alcohol 12 years. I get to work doing what I absolutely love. I have amazing relationships and I've never been happier. So it's like when I think about possibility and my own contrast, it's just boundless, and I'm not special. If I can do it, anyone can. So it's like wherever your starting point is, it is exponential how far you can go.
I love that. That's a great response to my question. Sounds like you're living the American dream in a sense. You're happy, you're healthy, and things are going well for you. Hey, look, so early ambition growing up, you became a cover girl. When you were, let's say, a teenager, were you thinking one day I'm going to become a cover girl or a model?
No, modeling, even though it's funny, it was my first job, which looking back on it, it's kind of creepy. But I was 13 and my first job ever was modeling wedding dresses. So
Oh,
I guess the seed was planted early, but I did not want to become a model. I wanted to become a broadcast journalist.
uh-huh.
So that was my passion. That was my goal. I worked in college for a local NBC, hosting a show Sunday mornings, 9 a.m. time slot. My undergrad was in broadcast journalism, and I was really going to launch my career, and everything was going well to support that. And then I started modeling to pay for college, make money, and just kind of like if you throw a frog in boiling water, it will jump right out.
Yeah.
But if you put it in lukewarm water and you just heat it up degree by degree, that was my submersion into the modeling world. And the worse my addiction got, the more money I made, the less I could actually function in a normal job. It was kind of like this trifecta, the perfect storm. So then I blew my broadcast career by posing naked. And they will not let you report on serious topics once you have done that. So
Uh-huh.
there are certainly consequences to our actions. But my
Yeah.
original dream was journalism.
So you started at 13. So what were you discovered, because of your physique or what?
Well, it happened because I knew a girl that was really successful in the modeling industry, and we became best friends, and I think she just wanted me to go travel with her. And so she was my in to that world, to different agents, introducing me to different photographers. That was how I started going to the Playboy Mansion, and so it was through her that all these opportunities kind of came to be. But a lot of my career at that time was fun. I was a spokesmodel for a few different motorcycle
Wow.
products. So I got to go to Sturgis, Biketoberfest. there was a lot of really positive things as well. And I was really sad to hear about all the allegations out against Playboy. And I am certainly not discounting those stories from women. My experience with Playboy was actually very positive. I was treated with respect. I've actually been way worse sexually harassed in like quote unquote like corporate America, real jobs. So my experience with Playboy was pretty positive, but unfortunately at that time my addiction was so bad, nothing was going to be positive. Like I was so sick, wherever you go, there you are. And my life was just completely out of control at that time.
Yeah. So you mentioned Playboy. So was Hugh Hefner around when you arrived on the scene?
Yes, he was. And I met him several times. And again, had a wonderful experience. The last time I saw him was his 80th birthday. That was the last time I was at the mansion, and I went to rehab like the next
Yeah.
week. So
Yeah. So what was, I mean, but you hung out with the Hollywood crowd, as I understand it. That must have been like a glamorous lifestyle for you at first, at least in the beginning.
there was definitely an allure to it. And I mean, making that amount of money that quick was certainly enticing. And there was just a lot of stimulus. Every day it was, limos and parties and in the Hollywood Hills. But the reality of it was outside of those moments was dark and depression and sickness.
Yeah.
And if I can paint another picture for you, I had just shot for FHM magazine and I was so excited about it because it was one of the only things I had done with my clothes on. So like my family could actually see it. And, it was, yeah, I was actually really proud of the photos. I'm dating a guy who plays for the Chargers. I'm making all this money. I'm traveling 260 days out of the year, shooting at phenomenal locations. And I hated myself. Like my body image was just shattered. Here I am in a magazine. I never felt uglier. I have all this money. I'm living in Newport Beach, this glamorous. I never felt more dirty and dark. I've got this guy, he's an NFL player. It should be amazing. I mean, I can't even tell you the juxtaposition and how challenging that can be. A
Mhm.
lot of times we look at people when they're in the depths of hell and we can really have a lot of compassion for them.
Mhm.
But one of the worst moments is when you look like you have it all and you're still miserable
Yeah.
because you don't even have the illusion anymore of, oh, once this happens, then I'll be happy because
Yeah.
it's already happened. And you're
Uh,
surrounded with beauty and you're still in absolute hell. And that is a very terrifying place.
right. We're going to dig deeper in that in a moment, but still want to get into you as a model because we don't know, those of us who are on the outside, is it like being an athlete that you got to stay fit, that you got to watch your diet? Can you tell us what it's like to maintain yourself as a model?
Oh, it's exceptionally confusing. I kind of hit this sweet spot in modeling where the pendulum was always swinging from side to side. So they wanted you really curvy, then they wanted you really skinny. They wanted you ethnic. No, they want you looking more white. Like, so I was constantly being told that whatever marker I hit, it needed to be different, literally. So I didn't know whether to starve myself or put on muscle or keep my hair dark or try to go blonde. So it was like just always trying to fit into the mold of what was popular at the
Mhm.
moment. And the other thing to remember is like, yes, okay, so I'm snagging some of these jobs, right? And I'm making good money, but then I'm also losing a ton of jobs as well. And they are not nice. They will just come in and look at you and go, ugh, no. And
Mm.
you're going up against the most beautiful women in the world. So, I mean, it was so fascinating to just watch myself and the stories I would tell and trying to frame my identity in that world. But, you talk about looks and maintaining weight. I am not a naturally thin girl. I mean, I was an athlete my entire life. I'm definitely more muscular. So for me to keep my weight low enough to survive that industry, I mean, that's one of the reasons I turned to stimulants. It
Mm.
was like doing cocaine and speed all the time that was how I didn't eat so I could keep working.
Mhm.
And here it's you're on the cover of a magazine is literally the picture of health, and I've never been sicker. Like I literally didn't eat hardly anything for years,
Mhm.
and smoked meth to be able to look acceptable so that I could be this symbol of health or this image of attraction. And that's not true for all the girls in the industry, but the ones that I knew, yeah, it was a constant struggle. There's nothing healthy about it, and it's so sad. I read something the other day that especially little girls, they're starting to diet as young as 5.
Oh my. Oh my, what that says about our culture. So the demand on a woman who's a model to be beautiful, does that cause some sense of anxiety and depression
Absolutely,
for you?
because you're constantly not enough. And that's what the advertising industry thrives. That's why it's $1 billion industry, is telling you you're not enough. So then you will do anything, spend any amount of money to
Yeah.
then create, the possibility that you may, for a moment, be enough. And
Uh-huh.
so, the diet industry, plastic surgery skyrocketed during COVID because, of course, everybody is now online looking at themselves all the time. Then we have social media.
Yeah.
I'm just so thankful that that wasn't around when I was young, because the
Mm,
comparison, it's just unbelievable how challenging it is. And I think about young women comparing themselves to what they're seeing on social media. And I will just tell you, the reality is most people don't look like that. I can remember
yeah.
the first time I was at the Playboy Mansion. This is not to take away from any of these women. They're beautiful, they're stunning, but they don't look the way they do on magazine covers.
Mm,
Those are
mm,
filtered, airbrushed, face tuned, every imperfection perfected. So
mm.
it's this illusion. And I
Yeah,
love the accounts that are coming out now that really show true skin texture, and everyone has cellulite and real bodies, because this illusion of perfection is where so many beautiful women go to die. And you will
yeah,
spend your whole life trying to chase it, and you'll never ever get it. The carrot is always always in front of you.
yeah. I love it that you are transparent about your addicted life or life as a substance abuser. And we're going to talk about that for a little bit. So, when did you realize that you were a substance abuser?
I was one of those people that the first time I drank, I slammed like 7 shots of the worst jungle juice concoction you could ever imagine. I had just poured every sort of vodka gin into this bottle. And I had just broken up with a boyfriend, and I slammed this concoction. And I just remember thinking, I'm home. I literally just, it was an exhale that I had been looking for forever. So at 12 years old, drinking became not even just my primary coping mechanism, my only coping mechanism.
Wait a
When
minute. Did you just say 12 years old,
at
Joe?
12, I did,
Oh
yes.
my. Mm. So, what do you think you were trying to find something or trying to lose something when you took that shot the way you did?
It's a great question. And I always say we use to either start feeling something or to stop.
Mm.
And so for me, my original compulsion to drink was around stopping feeling the anxiety, depression, sadness, everything that I was, I mean, here I am, this young girl going through puberty. My hormones are a mess. My home life is a mess. I have zero resources. I'm so disconnected from myself, from God, from life, from my family. And then I take this drink and I just suddenly am numb. So I was craving the absence of feeling. And then it got to the point where sometimes I could drink and I could shut down that part of me that just hated myself, and I could disconnect from the shame long enough that I could feel joy or I could feel excitement. And, we have to remember that like dopamine is a chemical of motivation.
Hmm.
So it is the idea that I might feel good about something, right? Where serotonin is actually satisfaction. So the addiction is the dopamine hit. It's the illusion that I might feel better. And we become addicted to that experience as well. It's not even just the substance, but it is the ritualization of I'm going to do this thing and then I'm going to feel better. So I became addicted to that false prophecy.
Yeah, yeah. So when did you start going deeper as a substance abuser? First alcohol, then when did you start going deeper into that world?
Well, in college, I had a bunch of friends that got into cocaine. I mean, I had done that in high school. I went to a really prestigious boarding school. So, like, all the kids had all the same problems. They just had more money. So, better drugs. But I didn't get addicted to cocaine until college. And then that became, as I said, a way for me to keep my weight down. And then in the modeling industry, I went to meth because it was just readily available and it really took away my appetite. And contrary to popular belief, it was something that I could do and maintain. Like
Mm,
cocaine is so disruptive to sleep cycles and, mood, and the tolerance rapidly builds. That wasn't sustainable for me to use, but I could smoke meth for like a
mm,
year straight and function. I mean, not well, but enough. And so, one of the things that really drives me crazy about drug education and the scare tactics we use, a lot of people have seen there's a billboard of a woman and it's an anti meth billboard. And this woman is just so decrepit looking and boils all over her face, and it's like it's just takes once, and this idea that you're going to smoke meth and you're going to look like that. And
mm.
for me, the first time I smoked meth, I was in the back of a limo with a bunch of models. None of them looked like that. So this scare tactic approach or dare or anything that we do, we really are harming the message,
Mm.
because a lot of what we need to be getting through and landing with people, they discredit the second you lie to people. And
Yeah.
yes, you may get addicted the very first time you use it, but you may not. You
Uh,
may be able to function and look, beautiful despite the toxic crap that you are putting in your body. Like, all of those things are true. So we have to stop with the scare tactics and really get underneath of like, what are you looking for?
mm.
What is right with the addiction? What does it do for you?
Yeah.
When we can come from that approach, we can actually make a difference. But scaring people does not work. It
Yeah.
works for the people that don't need it.
Yeah, I'm glad you're doing it because you have a powerful message and it's coming from someone who knows. But did you try to hide your addiction early on, and how did you do that, or did you not?
I never hid the drinking. I grew up in a family where alcoholism was just rampant, and all my friends' parents and their friends and all. I mean, it was so drinking was so normalized around me that I never felt I needed to hide. Even cocaine had this kind of like prestigious taboo allure to it. I didn't try to hide that. The meth I was extremely ashamed of. That I did keep very private, and I usually use that alone. I drank alone a lot, but I would drink out. I would do cocaine out, but that was the most amount of shame I think I felt about anything was the meth use.
Mhm. When did you hit? Tell us about. Did you hit rock? Let me ask the question differently. Did you hit rock bottom, and is that what pointed you in a different direction?
I hit it and I hit it multiple times. Like I thought I had hit rock bottom, and then turns out you could actually go lower. But the first time I hit it, I was still living in Hollywood. Like I said, I'm dating this guy who plays for the NFL. I'm going to the Playboy Mansion parties, and on the surface everything looks great, and I literally wanted to die. It was one of the worst, darkest times of my life. And I think a lot of us have the experience at some point of going, wow, it would just be nice if I wasn't here anymore.
Mm,
That's much different than I'm actually intending to do something about it. Like
mm,
it goes against nature for us to want to harm ourselves. So that was
mm,
a very scary feeling for me. I was absolutely ready to kill myself. And I remember I woke up on my kitchen floor. I didn't know what day it was. I didn't know if it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon or the morning. And I just called my mom and I said, I need to go to rehab. Like, I'm not going to make it. I knew. And so that was the first time I went to rehab, and I went to one of those, $100,000 bougie treatment centers
Mhm.
on the ocean. And it didn't do shit because the
Yeah.
bottom line is they basically put me in AA, which is supposed to be free. And what I will say though is I'm really grateful
Mm.
it kept me alive. So it bought me time. I got out of that treatment facility and I never used hard drugs again.
Mhm.
So that was really successful. The problem for me though is alcohol has always been my deepest, darkest issue. And I was able to stay sober for 6 months, just white knuckling it. I mean, every day was such a challenge. It was everything I could do to just not take a drink, but I was
Mhm.
absolutely miserable. And I knew I'm like, if I'm going to be this unhappy, I'd rather be drunk and unhappy.
Mhm.
Like this is not sustainable. And sure enough, so I started drinking again. And then I found an even deeper bottom. I went to treatment again, but this time it worked. So
Mhm.
multiple times. And that's something, if anybody is listening and they love someone who is addicted or they themselves are trying to get better,
Mhm.
the most important thing is that you just don't quit, that
Yeah.
it hasn't happened yet. And as long
Mhm.
as you stay committed and you keep trying new things, like expand your horizon, you don't have to do it the way everybody tells you you do. There are lots of options. I remember somebody told me once, you have to go to AA or you're never going to be sober.
Mhm.
And I am very grateful for AA. I think the 12 steps are brilliant. I encourage everyone to work them. It's phenomenal, but that was not a conducive environment for my healing. Every
Mhm.
time I went in, I felt predator energy. All the men were just on me. I was so vulnerable. I had really negative experiences. So for somebody to tell me that I had to do AA or I was going to drink again, what an awful thing to tell someone.
Right.
And it's absolutely not true. There's smart recovery, there's Buddhist recovery, there's online options, there's psychedelic therapy. There are just so many ways. It's like just keep going until you find what works for
Mhm.
you.
Yeah. You mentioned that at what point you wanted to die. Did you ever make an attempt, Joe?
I had 3 suicide attempts and they were not cries for help. They were I really, really meant it. And the last one absolutely should have killed me. And
Mhm.
it is amazing and a true testament to the human body, that I'm here today. And it was an extreme overdose. And when I finally made it to the hospital, I was at a point 4 BAC, which that alone should have killed me. But the amount of medication I had in my system,
Mhm.
it is a miracle my organs still work.
Yeah.
And not only do they still work, I am like thriving. I am one of the healthiest people you will ever meet. So I am so fortunate.
Yeah, and gosh, it's kind of reminds me of sometimes people are supposed to be here and they connect with that higher spirit, and you are blossoming because of all that. But look, so this successful model, making good money, living a big life. Did you feel any sense of guilt and shame because of your journey before you got on the path that you're on now?
Oh, yeah, such a great question. I'm trying to tap into what's most true. There is some residual shame. Certainly not so much around the modeling. I can look at myself and go, that was my best option at that time. And I think whenever we look at women, especially in the sex industry, it is so easy to be so judgmental. It's kind of that Madonna whore complex. We just really want to see women as this beautiful, pure light, and we just absolutely love villainizing them. But it's like until you're living in somebody's shoes and you know what resources are available to them, I had nothing to love within me. So
Hmm.
why wouldn't I go into that industry? I had no values, no anchor. I didn't believe I was worthy of anything better. I couldn't support myself financially doing anything else because my addiction was so bad. So
Hmm.
then here is this opportunity, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to make 10 grand in an hour. Like, yes, I did that. And I don't fault myself for it.
Hmm.
What I do feel is very, very sad that that was my best option, that I
Yeah.
couldn't get the help because my life would have gone in a totally different direction. So it's not shame, it's deep compassion. Now, I will share, when I got out of the modeling industry, I got my life together. I went got my master's degree. I get this job, teaching at a university. My biggest fear was that my past would come out because here I am, I'm like 28, I'm teaching 18-year-old guys, and I couldn't even imagine how awful that would be if my Playboy, Hustler, Penthouse, if anybody had seen that stuff, I would have lost my job
Hmm.
100%. So I carried so much fear of that coming out for so long. Then I got married, and my ex-husband and I had a martial arts school. I ran our kids program. So, I mean, again, here I am just so afraid. Oh my God, what if these parents found out what I used to do? And I'm teaching their kid. So the amount of shame and fear of being exposed, it was wretched. I carried it forever. And my ex-husband, when we got divorced, I knew this was all going to come out. Like the second I left him, sure enough, he just told everyone who I was about my past. Do you know she used to do this? But what's really crazy is even though it came from such a place of hatred, it was the best gift he could have given me because it truly set me free. I was
Yeah.
like, great. Now this boulder that I carried around all the time of, oh God, what it would happen if they know. Well, cool. Now they know. I can
Hmm.
set that down. And to be honest, the fallout was zero. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure people have their own process, but they didn't bring that to me. Nobody was rude or mean. As a matter of fact, everyone was like, oh my God, knowing you now, I can't believe that. That's incredible. Like people were so supportive and loving
Hmm.
and kind. So my deepest fear, he exposed, and it was absolutely fine.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. So that compassion. I want to talk compassion later on, but I got to ask you because I heard you talk about shame and guilt. I stalked you on Google on YouTube, and I just love the way you shared around the differences. Can you share that with us, shame and guilt, and help us understand what they are?
Guilt is actually a wonderful emotion, right? Because what it does is it tells us when we're out of alignment.
Mhm.
So the idea that what I am doing, my behavior, the way I'm thinking about the world, the way I'm acting is out of alignment with my highest self. So then I feel guilt and it helps me course correct my behavior.
Mhm.
If I choose to work through whatever I need to internally so that I can show up differently. So guilt is great. Guilt is what you did is bad. Shame is I am bad. So
Mhm.
shame becomes a foundational experience of ourselves at the core as rotten and bad. So shame can be exceptionally debilitating because if I believe I am inherently unworthy of love and bad, and I am trying to, from that place, forgive myself, do better in the world, like change and shift into this person that's more loving and compassionate. And that's my base belief. I'm
Mhm.
not going to get very far. So we have to be so careful about that. And I work with this with my clients a lot of what is your foundational belief? Because I happen to believe that we are all inherently worthy of love. And
Yeah.
I like to think of people as the statue of David. It's such a cool story. So when Michelangelo created the statue of David, at that time nobody had seen anything like it. It was just the most magnificent work of art ever. And a reporter went up to him and said, "How did you create this?" And he said, "It's easy. I just chipped away the parts that weren't angel."
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I think about us as individuals trying to better our lives, open our hearts, do it differently. It's like when we can just knock away the parts that don't fit, but we
Yeah.
know we are inherently angel. What an easier, more
Mhm.
beautiful path.
Yeah. I love it. I just love the way you share that. Now, in one of your talks, you mentioned Dr. Gabor Mate, the medical doctor and writer. Tell us, I don't want to ask you some questions about that, but help our readers, for those our listeners and viewers, for those who haven't heard Dr. Gabor, help us understand who he was. Who was he, and why was he attractive to you?
Oh, such a beautiful question. I love that man. So he
Uh,
wrote a book called The Realm of Hungry Ghosts. And the title alone is brilliant. So in Buddhist philosophy, there's all these different realms. The hungry ghost realm, if you can imagine, there are these creatures and they're called pitas. So they have huge bellies and then tiny, tiny necks. And
mm,
there's food all around them and they're starving all the time. But the second they eat, the food turns to ash in their throats. So it's this idea of this constant craving that can never be satisfied. And when you think about our culture, we really are a culture of hungry ghosts. It's never enough,
mm,
right? We're trying to fill that God shaped hole with all these external temporary dopamine hits, whether it's social media or drugs or shopping or sex or whatever. We're just like grasping at anything to try to make us feel whole and complete. So he wrote a book called The Realm of Hungry Ghosts, and that's how I discovered him. But his story is phenomenal. He was a medical doctor and he was in Canada, and he started working with their version of Skid Row. So these are heroin addicts that have been living on the streets, Hep C, AIDS, lots of different comorbidities, extreme mental health issues. And what he did was so brilliant. He opened a clinic where they could actually come and be safely injected. So this is important. Harm reduction is important. A lot of pushback goes, oh, well, we're condoning drug use. And that's not true at all. You're not condoning it. You're just supporting people that are already doing it with clean needles, with medical help. If I overdose and I've got somebody with Narcan and medical experience, I'm going to survive. And when it comes to addiction, that is the only time somebody cannot get better is when they're dead. So
mm,
these harm reduction clinics like this help keep people alive.
mm,
Plus, getting sober is already so incredibly difficult. It's so much more difficult if I have Hep C, if
mm,
I have AIDS, if I have all of these other things that I'm now also trying to manage.
mm,
So he would bring people in and then keep them safe while they used.
mm.
He would also let them know, hey, upstairs, when you're ready, there is a detox clinic and we
Wow.
will medically supervise your detox. So people would come in, they felt respected, they were treated with dignity, even though they are in the most undignified time of their life. They developed relationships and rapport, and they knew that they could get help on that second floor. Then the next one was treatment. Then the next was vocational training. Then the next was, it was just this beautiful pyramid of healing.
Yeah.
But it started with a base trust and love in the human condition, and like this idea, just to bring it full circle, that you are inherently worthy of love and respect. That
Mm,
was his philosophy.
mm,
And it was amazing and it was extremely successful. And of course, other governments got involved and it got shut down. And, it's scary to people. And I understand that. When we look at harm reduction measures or anything of that nature, of course we don't want to promote drug use, and
yeah.
the reality is we need to stop focusing so much on the war against drugs, and we need to start asking ourselves why people want to check out at this alarming rate.
Hmm.
I mean, that it's a supply versus demand issue, and it's just unbelievable the amount of people that are suffering. But that's what he did, is he started exploring why.
Yeah.
He got curious.
Hmm. You made so many powerful statements in your share a moment ago, but one that I got to have you highlight, and you mentioned it was something to the effect that there's always hope for recovery unless you're dead. Do you recall what you just said? And can you repeat it for us and tell us a little more about that?
I truly believe this. And the reason I speak about it is because I can embody it because I went through it. Like when people look at me, they think, oh, she didn't get that bad, or it wasn't. No, I'm here to tell you, I hated myself. I wanted to die. I was in jail. I mean, I've woken up in mental institutions in San Francisco. I have been held against my will, strapped to beds. Like I was as sick as anybody I have ever met. That was my truth. My point in saying this is if I can get better, anyone can. The only time somebody cannot get better is when they're dead.
Mm,
It is so easy to look at somebody and go, there's just no hope. They're
yeah,
never going to do it. It's
yeah.
never going to happen. And I understand that. And you may be right. And if I can do it, anyone can do it. And we don't know when the miracle is going to happen. We don't. A shift in consciousness, like what actually helped me finally get sober was I was violently raped. And it was the first time in my life that I felt compassion for myself. And
Mm,
I mean, truly, like I felt this sadness for myself that I had never felt before because I hated myself and I was filled with shame. And for the first time, it was almost the way a mother would look at a child and go, I just love you so much. I felt that. And it was through this horrific act of violence and evil
mm,
that this momentary glimpse, I won't call it love, but I will call it compassion, became possible for me.
mhm,
And I also want to say, because I've shared this story before, especially at universities, and I've had young women come up and say, I was raped and I still think it's my fault. So I want to address that as well. If you haven't had that opening of compassion yet, just know it hasn't happened yet because that is never your fault. And truth is always true, whether you believe it or not. And
mhm.
that should have never happened to you. And so, if anyone is listening to this who has been assaulted, just know, let me say it for you. You are loved, and that should not have happened to you.
Mhm.
And that is a seed that we can plant. And that became the opening for me to change my entire life.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. But let's just say a little more because how does a woman feel after someone has so violently assaulted them? What does that do to a person and their story until they change it?
Unfortunately for me, it's such a reoccurring pattern in my life. I was molested first when I was 4 years old, and it has just happened
Mm,
throughout my life. And so the numbness that I experienced at first became a constant theme. Like when we disassociate from a traumatic event, it's almost like that energy is just encapsulated and we bury it. Like I didn't even remember that I was molested when I was 4 until I was 23. So it is really powerful the way the psyche will protect us from things that are so harmful. Um, but when you ask what it does, it's just so compounding of shame, like if I attack you, shame is created. If I violate you in any way, shame is created, but perpetrators don't assume it. So the victim then has their own shame and then takes the perpetrator's shame as well, because energy cannot be created nor destroyed, right? So that shame is there. So somebody's got to take it. So
yeah.
what often is the victim does. And we learn this also so early in childhood, like God bless our parents. I know they do the best that they can, but children, we learn very early on that it is our fault, that we're responsible. And a lot of that comes just from the anxiety of being out of control. It's just easier to believe I caused it because then I can do something different and it won't happen anymore. So we're
Mhm.
trying to regain control. But if I go into a situation and I'm sexually assaulted and my core belief is this is my fault, now I'm assuming not only my shame, but their shame as well. And it shows up so differently in everyone, men and women, young and old. We all internalize that experience differently, even though I believe we have a lot of parallel processes. But for me, the way it showed up was, I'm dirty, I deserve this.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that became the lens through which I saw myself.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's such a deep topic. Look, I got to bring you back just to talk about that. But I want to ask you, moving forward, how if Dr. Gabor's writings and his talks help you understand your trauma?
One of the most powerful questions he asked that really created an opening for me
Mm,
was, what's right with the addiction? Because
mm,
we always talk about addiction and it's so negative and it's awful, and it is. It's horrific. It was the first time that it had been approached from that angle of like, what did it do for you? And then from that lens of, okay, let me find the payoff. It almost allowed me to not explore with so much shame, but more from a place of compassion. And I could see what it did for me. It numbed me out. It gave me a momentary reprieve from the anxiety and hatred I was feeling. Like all of a sudden, I don't want to say it justified it because it's not even about that, but I could understand my deep desire and yearning.
mm,
You know, and then you get into the brain and, you know, we can go down like a million different rabbit holes of addiction. But for me, that self-forgiveness started coming when I got compassionately curious, which is another thing that Gabor is really big on, is how do you just explore with compassionate curiosity? Like this intention of just allowing somebody to be vulnerable and open, and let's just look at this. Like,
mm,
where did it come from? What did it do for me?
mm.
Do for you? But that was the question that really solidified my trust in him,
Yeah.
was what's right with the addiction.
So Gabor says that, the trauma is the wound that we carry. Do you feel that you have been able to heal that wound, that trauma from 4 years old and when you were later in life?
You know, I have done so much work on myself. I think it's so tricky when it comes with trauma. You know, we used to do exposure therapy, right? Like
Yeah.
we'll expose you until you don't care anymore. And I understand the desire to discharge the energy. We do need to do that. That's important. And I think something painful should always hurt you. So it's
Mm,
like when I reflect back on those things, of course, I still feel sadness or rage or any of it. And it doesn't interrupt my life. So that's where I would say it's is healing. Like I form really meaningful, deep, intimate connections. I truly enjoy sex. I don't believe that my body is all I have to offer the world anymore. So those are my markers of healing, where I
yeah.
can say, yes, like I I believe I have healed that. And I'm always open because a lot of times you say something and then it's like a spiral staircase and you just hit it on a different
Mm,
layer. You know, there are layers to our healing and it is very nonlinear. So I'm open if there are deeper crevices to explore, and I'm grateful
yeah.
because my biggest fear is that I wouldn't be able to love
Hmm.
myself or a partner. You know, I believe sex is such a sacred and important way to connect. Like, that would be just so awful if the horrific actions of somebody else stole that from me.
Hmm.
You know, and I will say this, it's like if you've been victimized, that is never your fault, and
Hmm.
healing is your responsibility because you
Yeah.
deserve to live a full life. So do
Yeah.
whatever you need to do that.
Yeah, I'm in talk with you. I'm sure anyone who's watching this, or if you're not watching this, go make sure you watch it because Joe, you showcase this resilience of the human spirit that you don't as the adage is, you don't look like what you've been through. You're showcasing resilience. I want to move on real quickly though. We got to come back to this. You talk about rewriting your story and your journey to wellness. I mean, you kind of touched on this earlier, but I want to ask it here because I want to get into, you rewriting your story, your journey to wellness. Did you flip a switch, or was a switch flipped, and the next day you were just on a different path, or was there something else?
You know, I was so fortunate. When I went to treatment the second time, I did aversion therapy. Now, this hospital that I went to is not around anymore, and it was the only one of its kind in the United States. So I'm so deeply saddened by the fact that this is not available anymore. Because for me, a switch was flipped. So, aversion therapy, essentially, I would go in a little room, they would inject me with something that caused flu like symptoms. I would drink a water glass full of Epicac. So, if you have a kid and they eat something they shouldn't have, you take a tablespoon, it induces vomiting. Well, I drank a water glass full of it. And then I would just pound like 20 glasses of alcohol and throw up like The Exorcist violently for hours.
Mm.
It was horrific. So that was one day. The next day, they did a IV mixture of Propanol. That's what Michael Jackson OD'd on, and truth serum. And what they would do is they would basically, you'd have the IV, you'd wake up in another room and then listen to a counseling session you just did with your unconscious. So they
Mm.
really got into those deeper layers of stories, but they would also ask your unconscious self, is the aversion working? So they knew if you needed more aversion therapy treatments or not.
Mm.
So I did this for 10 days and I have never wanted a sip of alcohol again. I didn't have to
Wow.
try, I didn't have to any of it. I mean, I've done a lot of therapy because I had a lot of things to heal.
Mhm.
But as far as cravings for alcohol, that was 12 years ago and I've never wanted it ever since. And
Wow.
that is the greatest gift because I was not strong enough to withstand cravings. I
Mhm.
wasn't. I was one of those people, if I wanted it, eventually I was going to have it. So that was the greatest gift and miracle in my life was that switch was turned off in me.
Well, I mean, as amazing as what this clinic did for you, why do you suppose it's no longer here in the States?
A big corporation bought it, and as so often happens, you lose the intimacy. And like when something is a small business and it's not all about shareholders, it's run differently. And so, my goal, though, if anybody is listening and wants to invest in this, I am still connected with the medical staff from there, and we could open another one.
Uh-huh.
It's really important that this treatment exists. It doesn't work for other drugs. They tried to do it with things like weed or cocaine or pills. It's only effective with alcohol. But when you consider how many millions of people are struggling to not drink, the rate of successful treatment was astronomical. Like my cohort, there were 20 of us, five of us are still sober
Mm.
over a decade later. Not
Okay.
there's not a treatment center in America that can even come close to that kind of
Uh-huh.
statistic. So why isn't it around anymore? Great question. This is the biggest tragedy ever as far as treatment that this is not around.
Yeah. Look, you've talked a lot about rewriting your story, and I just want to touch a couple of things. We're running out of time here, but I'm going to touch a couple of things that are part of that. Today, 2024, and you've been doing this for a while now, you are considered an addiction specialist. Tell us about that. How did you get involved with that, and what's your work?
Well, my passion to help people struggling with addiction, obviously my own personal experience, but also my family struggled. So I have my personal experience as an alcoholic, but then also I know what it's like to love somebody with addiction issues, and so that has driven my passion to help. I was so fortunate. Like I said, I got to teach addiction courses at the University of Nevada. I got to work with college students. That is one of my favorite groups of people to work
Yeah.
with. They're so bright. I mean, you just hear so many horror stories about this upcoming generation. My experience was I am on fire for them. Their
Mhm.
curiosity and their depth and their willingness to shake shit up. I love it. And I was so inspired working with them.
Yeah.
But so teaching at the university and overseeing drug and alcohol prevention, obviously doing a TED talk, I speak at conferences. I work a lot with law enforcement and judges talking about harm reduction. I'm a big advocate of drug courts. I
Yeah.
think if we can give people the option for treatment rather than putting them in jail,
Yeah.
there is great opportunity for success. And I think it is a tragedy that a lot of people are in jail because the substance they use is illegal. We
Hmm.
have plenty of laws to protect people. Like if I'm a heroin addict and I steal your car to go buy more heroin, the charge is grand theft auto. If
Hmm.
I'm a meth addict and I attack you, the charge is assault. So there is always going to be laws to protect people from criminal behavior. But when we look at just drug laws and locking people up, I mean, think of how many people are in jail right now because they had weed when now it's widely available. It's disgusting. It is so sad.
Hmm. It is indeed. Addiction specialist, writing your story. Mindset coach. What is that, and what do you do?
So I work a lot with men who are CEOs and they just absolutely kick ass in business. And their interpersonal relationships are where some of those skills don't transfer
Mhm.
smoothly over. So I do a lot of intimacy work with men. And, you know, my passion for love and connection, I mean, when I think about what drives me, it is love. And so being able to support clients as
Mhm.
they work to become the best version of themselves in their intimate relationships is one of the greatest joys of my life. I truly, truly love watching men open their hearts. And I can look back at my history, of course, with men and the violence and everything I've gone through. It makes perfect sense that that would be one of my life's goals
Yeah.
is, you know, to help men drop deeper into their hearts. So that is a lot of the work that I do. I work a lot with individuals who love somebody who is addicted on boundaries, responsibility, you know, like not taking that on, enmeshment, codependency, all of it. If you
Hmm.
love somebody who is addicted, we are just as sick.
Yeah.
So that is a fact,
Yeah.
and it's also a precious opportunity. When I say I rewrote my story of addiction,
Mhm.
what I mean is this: I am so thankful my addiction was as bad as it was because I know so many people that are just hovering below the line. Like it's not good, it's interrupting their lives, they don't feel good, their health isn't great, but it's not bad enough that they have to do something about it. My
Mhm.
addiction was so shattering, it took me to such dark places that I had no choice but to die or get better. And
Uh-huh.
so my addiction was my evolution into the deepest love that I could have ever experienced for myself through an equal and opposite amount of pain that it forced me to be with.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, loving somebody who is addicted, that can be the catalyst for your greatest transformation through
Mhm.
pain and suffering.
I love it. Transformation is possible. Hey, we're writing your story. Now, are you an author?
I am not. I blog a lot though, and I am considering taking a collection of some of my favorite moments and turning that into a book.
Uh-huh.
For me, it's more about the time, like having the time to really dedicate to that. But so what I will say is not yet, but
Not
I do
yet.
blog a lot, journal on social media.
Uh-huh. Now, you are working on your doctorate, right?
So that I actually dropped out. I am
Okay.
basically all at dissertation. And for me, once I got married and we owned a business and teaching at the university, it wasn't what I needed to pursue anymore.
I got
So
you.
that was a
Understood.
dream I had to let go of as well.
Uh-huh. Rewriting your story. You've already mentioned it. TEDx speaker. What was that like for you to step onto that stage and you tell your story?
It was very humbling. You know, at the time I was pretty cocky. I'd been speaking a lot. I had been teaching for a decade, you know, and I was very used to walking in front of a room of hundreds of people and doing my thing. And when I was about to walk onto that TEDx stage, I felt so much anxiety. It was really one of the first times I went, oh my God, am I going to be able to do this? And it was the spotlight and the sign behind. I don't know. It was crazy, but it was great because this woman came up. She goes, I know you're nervous. Stand like Superwoman.
Uh-huh.
And she did. She had me just hands on my hips, feet apart, power
Yeah.
position, shoulders back.
Mhm.
And that is such a great life hack.
Uh,
Put your chin up, puff your chest out. Like we can actually trick ourselves into confidence through the way in which we hold our body. If you're slumped over in this protective posture, your energy radiates that. If
Yeah,
your shoulders back, chest up, like I'm going to go slay this, then that's what you do. So
yeah.
TEDx was such a gift. It was such a special opportunity. I'm so grateful for it.
Yeah, that was a wonderful talk. And if anyone hasn't watched it, you would really enjoy it. So, look, let me ask you this. Is there anything else in your heart that we haven't touched upon today that you want to share with us?
Mm, that's a great question. Thank you. We've talked a lot about when you're in the depths of hell and you're just trying to come up to baseline. But I I just want to say this. It's like allow yourself to just dream bigger than you ever thought possible because what's behind the curtain, what could happen for your life is so much bigger than your small mind can often even conceptualize. Like if you would have asked me 10 years ago, would I be living in paradise like as happy as I am? I could have never manifested this because I would have never let myself dream big enough. So it's like
Mhm.
this idea of just kind of getting out of the way and allow for miracles, allow for possibilities. Be
Hmm.
so mindful who you surround yourself with. I
Yeah.
mean, it's true. We are so influenced by those around us. Like, find people who love you, who support you, who are your greatest cheerleaders. Find people that you can be real with, that have seen the dark and the messy. And it's like, just allow what you can't even conceive is possible to become possible.
Aha, I love it. I love it. On that, you've been listening to the Possibility Action Network podcast. Our guest today has been Joe Harvey Weatherford. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton. Until next time, good day